In this video, I will show you how to create, read, update and delete customers using ASP.NET, SQL Server and VS Code. So we will create a simple CRM application. So we can click on customers and here we have all the customers. We can create a new customer. We can update the customer details. So here we have the customer details and we can update these details. And to delete a customer, we can click on this delete button. So here we have this confirmation message. If we click on cancel, the customer will not be deleted. And if we click on delete, here we can see that the customer with the ID 15 has been deleted. So in this video, I will show you how to perform CRUD operations using SQL Client and Visual Studio Code. We will not use Entity Framework, but you can follow this video using Visual Studio. First, we need to check if .NET is installed or not. So let's open the command prompt. And here let's type .NET -- version. And here we can see that I have .NET 8. So if .NET is not installed, then we need to download it and to install it. So we can go to the browser and here let's type .NET. Let's go to the first link, then download. And here we can download and install .NET 8. Then we need SQL Server. So if it is not installed on your computer, then we can go to the browser and here we can type SQL Server. Let's go to the first link. Then we can download and install the Express Edition, which is a free version. So in this video, we will create a web application using VS Code. So let's go to VS Code. And we need to install some extensions. So let's click on this button. And the first extension is called C#. Let's select this extension. It is from Microsoft and you need to install it. So this extension is useful because it provides the auto-completion feature. The second extension is called C# extensions. So let's select this extension and also we need to install it. So using this extension, we can create C# classes and also we can create Razor pages. Then we need the NuGet Package Manager extension. So here let's type NuGet. Let's select this extension. And of course, we need to install it. So this extension allows us to install and to remove .NET packages. And because in this video I will connect to SQL Server using VS Code, I need to install another extension which is called SQL Server. Let's select this extension and let's install it. So when we install this extension, we will obtain this new icon. Now let's create a new project. So we can create a new folder. I will create it in the Documents folder. So here I already created a folder called VS Code Projects. Let's select it. And here we can create a new folder. Let's call it CRM App. So for the moment this folder is empty, and to create a new web application, let's open the terminal. And here let's type .NET New. And here we have several templates. So to create a new web application using Razor pages, we can use this template. So just here, let's type .NET New, then let's add Web App. So now the application is created correctly, and to run this application, we can type .NET Run. So now the application is running correctly and it is available at this URL. So we can click on this link and we obtain this application. This is the home page and this is the privacy page. Now let's create a new database and a new table. So I will connect to SQL Server using VS Code. So let's click on this icon. Let's create a new connection. So I will connect to the server that is available on my computer. So let's write dot. Then let's connect to the default database, so we don't need to provide the name of the database. We will use Windows Authentication, so let's select Integrated. And you can call this connection First Connection, for example. Then we need to enable Trust Server Certificate. So now we are connected to SQL Server and we need to create a new database. So we can make a right click, then new query. And here let's type SQL. Then we can select SQL Create Database. And we can call it CRMDB. Then let's execute the queries. So we can click here, then let's click on this button. And here we have this success message. Now let's close this connection. And we can delete it. Let's create a new connection. So the server is dot. The database is CRMDB. Let's select integrated and let's call it first connection. Let's click on this button. So for the moment we don't have any table, so let's create a new table. Then let's write the SQL queries that allow us to create a new table and to fill it. So here we will create the customers table. We will add the ID, which is the primary key, and it is auto-incremental. We will create the first name, last name, the email, which is unique. Then we have the phone number, the address, we have the company name, we have notes, and created at, which is the date of creating the customers. And by default, created at will be equal to the current date. Then we will insert into the customers table, we will insert the first name, last name, email, phone number, address, company, and notes. And here we have these rows. So now let's execute these two queries. And here we can see that we inserted 16 rows. Let's refresh the connection. And let's see the data of this table. And here we have the table data. Now let's create a new Razor page to display the available customers. So we can create it in the Pages folder. So here we can create a new folder. Let's call it Customers. Then let's create a new Razor page. And let's call it Index. So this is the Razor page and this is the corresponding model. Now let's add a link to this page in the navbar of the application. So we can go to the shared folder. Let's open the layout file. Then here we have the navbar. And you have these two items. So let's create a new item. We can copy this one. And let's paste it here. Let's call it Customers. And the Razor page is available in the Customers folder. So let's delete this text. Let's write Customers / the name of the Razor page, which is Index. Let's save the file. And we need to restart the application. So let's stop it and let's run it again. Let's go to the browser and let's refresh the page. So here we can see that we have this new item. And we have this page. Now we need to read the customers from the database. So we need to install a new package, which is the SQL client package. So we can use this item, then command palette, and here let's type NuGet package manager. Then let's select add package. Let's write SQL client, and let's press enter. Then we can either select system.data.sql client or microsoft.data.sql client. Both of them are valid, but this is the newest version, so let's select it. Let's select the newest version, and here we can see that the package is installed correctly. Now let's go to the index model. We can delete this field. And let's delete the constructor. Then to read the data from the database, we need to create a new class to store the customer data. We can create it in the same file. So just here, after the first class, we can create a new class. Let's call it customer info. Then let's add these properties. So first we need the customer ID, then we need the first name, the last name, the email, the phone number, the address, company, notes, and created at. So this class will be used to store the details of only one customer. So now let's create a list of customer info objects to store the data of all the customers from the database. So it should be public, like this we can access it from the page. And it is a list of customer info objects. Let's call it customers list. Then in the onGet method we need to connect to the database and to read the customers. So just here let's add the try catch block. In the catch block we have an error, so we can print the error on the console. And in the try block we need to connect to the database. So first we need to create the connection string. So in this connection string we have the name of the server, which is dot, which means the local machine. Then we have the name of the database, which is CRMDB. Then we have trusted connection is equal to true because we will use the Windows authentication. And here we have trust server certificate is equal to true. Then we need to connect to the database using this connection string. So let's create the SQL connection. Then let's add the namespace of this class. But for the moment, vscode does not suggest the namespace, so we can add it manually. So we have to add using Microsoft.data.sql client, but we still have an error. To fix it, let's save the file and let's build the application. So now the application is built correctly and the error disappeared. So here we will create an object of type SQL connection and we will connect to the database using this connection string. Then let's open the connection. So just here, let's add connection.open. Then let's write the SQL query that allows us to read the customers from the database. So here we will select all the columns from the customers table and we will order the data by descending order of ID. So this part is optional and it is useful to display the customers by newest customers first. So we can delete it, but I prefer to keep it. Then let's execute this query. So first we need to create an SQL command. So this is the SQL query and this is the connection that we created just here. Then let's create the SQL data reader. So this is the SQL data reader. It is equal to command.executeReader that allows us to execute this query. Then we need to read the different rows of the customers table. So here let's add while reader.read. So for every row of the customers table, we need to create an object of type customer info to store the customer data. So just here in the while loop, we can create an object of type customer info. Then we will set the ID, the first name, the last name, the email, phone, address, company, notes, and created at using the reader object that we have just here. So to read the ID, we have to call getInt32 because the ID is an integer. And because the ID is the first column of the customers table in the database, we have to add the index 0, which corresponds to the first column of the table. Then we will read the first name, which is a string, and it is the second column of the table. Then here we will read the last name, which is a string. So all of these data are string, and for created at, it is of type datetime. So we will call getDateTime, and we will convert it into a string. So we can add to string, and we can provide the format. So we will display the month, then the day, then the year. Then let's add this object to the customers list that we have just here. So here we can call customers list dot add. Then let's display the different customers in the page. So let's go to the page. We can delete this title and this div. And let's add this title, list of customers. So this title will be displayed in the center of the page. And then we can add this button, new customer. So this is a bootstrap button. And it will take us to this URL, /customers/create. So this Razor page does not exist for the moment, and later we have to create it in the customers folder. Then let's display a table. So this is a bootstrap table. We have the table head and the table body. In the table head, we have these columns. So we have the customer ID, the name, the email, the phone number, the company created at, and the action. So in the action, we will add two buttons, the edit button and the delete button. And then we have the body. So the table body is empty for the moment. And to fill it, we have to use for each loop. So let's add at for each. And we will read the customer from the customers list that is available in the model, which is this model. So for every customer, we will create a new table row. So this is an empty table row. And in the first cell, we will display the customer ID. So to access this variable into this HTML code, we have to write at, then customer.id. Then here we will display the name. So as we can see here, the second cell corresponds to the customer name. So just here, let's add at. And because we will display the first name plus the last name, we can use the explicit razor syntax, so we can add parentheses. Then let's write customer.firstname. Then let's add a space. Then let's add the last name. Then let's display the email, the phone number, the company, and created at. Then here we have the edit button and the delete button. When we click on edit, we will go to the edit page that should be created in the customers folder. And we have to provide this page with the customer ID. So just here, let's add question mark and let's add a parameter called ID, and it is equal to the customer ID. So we can copy this and let's paste it here. Let's do the same thing with the delete button. So later we need to create the edit page and the delete page. Let's save the file. We can save this file as well. And let's restart the application. Let's refresh the page. And this time we have the list of customers. Now I will show you how to create new customers. So when we click on new customer, we have this empty page. So we need to create the create page in the customers folder. Let's call it create. So in the create page, we will create a form, and the easiest way to read the data of the form is to create properties and to associate these properties to the form. So let's go to the model and let's add new properties. First, let's delete this field. We don't need it. Let's delete the constructor. And here let's create some properties. So we can add first name, last name, email, phone, address, company, and notes. So all of these properties will be associated to the form. Also, we can see that the phone is a string that can be null. This means that the phone number is optional. Also, the address and notes are optional. So to associate these properties to the form, we need to decorate them with the bind property attribute. So just here, let's add brackets, then bind property. And because the first name is required, let's add the required attribute. Let's copy these two attributes and let's use them to decorate the other properties. So the phone number is optional, so we can delete required. Then we can customize the error message of first name and last name if we don't provide them. So just here, let's add parentheses and let's define the error message property. So here we can write the first name is required. Let's do the same thing with the last name. Let's save the file and let's create the form. So we can delete the title of the page. And let's replace it with a bootstrap row that contains this div, which is a column. So this column will be displayed in the center of the page. And also we will add a rounded border to this column. Then here we have this H2 element with this title, new customer. and we will display this text in the center of the page. Then here, let's create the form. So this form will be submitted using the post method. So here let's add the method attribute, and it is equal to post. Then let's create the first field of this form. So we can add this div, which is a bootstrap row. Here we have this label with the text first name, so we can add this star because the first name is required. Then we have this input field that is bound to the first name property of the module, so it is bound to this property. Then here we have this span to display any validation error, so we can use the ASP validation for tag helper, and this is the corresponding property, first name. Then let's add another row for the last name, so we can copy this row, let's paste it here. In the label we can write last name, and we will bind this input field to the last name property. Let's copy the name of this property and let's paste it here. Then we can add another row for the email address, which is required, and here we have this input field that is bound to the email property and a span that is bound to the email property. Then we have this row for the phone number, which is optional, so we don't have star. Then here we have this input field that is bound to the phone number and the span which is bound to the phone property. Then we have this row for the address. Then we have this input field and this span which are bound to the address. Then we have company, then we have notes, and then we need to add two buttons, the submit button and the cancel button. So just here, let's create the two buttons. So here we have this row that contains two columns. This is the first column and this is the second one. In the first column we have this button which is the submit button and it has the text submit. And then in the second column we have this button, so it is a bootstrap button, and it is the cancel button, so it will take us to this URL, so it will take us to the list of customers. Let's save the file, and we need to restart the application. So instead of restarting the application after every modification, we can use the hot reload feature. So here we can type .NET watch. Let's click on customers, then new customer, and we obtain this form. Let's click on submit, and here we have the validation errors with the required properties. But for the phone number, address and notes, we don't have the errors because these properties are optional. Also, we can add some validation annotation with the email that should have the email format and with the phone number that should have the phone number format. So for the email property, we can add another attribute which is email address. And for the phone number, we can add another attribute which is the phone attribute. Let's save the file. And because we are using the hot reload feature, we don't need to restart the application because it will restart automatically. Now let's fill the form. So we can provide this value for the phone number. Let's click on submit. And here we can see that the phone number is not valid. Also, we did not lose the data of the form. Now let's provide a valid value. Then submit. So this time we don't have any validation error. Now I will show you how to save the customer in the database. So let's go to the create model. Then let's create the onPost method that will handle the post requests. So we can copy this. Let's paste it here. Let's rename it. So it should be called onPost. First, we need to check if the submitted data is valid or not. So we can use the model state. So if not, the model state is valid, this means that the submitted data is not valid. In this case, we will exit this method. First, we need to check if optional properties are null or not. So if phone is null, we will initialize it with an empty string. We will do the same thing with the address and with nodes. Then let's create a new customer. So let's add the try catch block. In the try block, we will connect to the database, and in the catch block, we have an error. So we can display the error on the console, but I prefer to display it to the user in the web page. So to display it to the user, let's create a new property. We can call it error message, which is initially empty. So error message will be equal to exception.message, then we will exit the onPost method. Then in the try block, let's connect to the database. So first we need the connection string. Then let's create the SQL connection. Let's add the package. Then let's open the connection. Then let's write the SQL query that allows us to insert a new customer in the customers table. So here we will insert into the customers table, we will insert the first name, last name, email, phone, address, company, and notes. And the values will be these parameters. So now we need to replace these parameters with the submitted data of the form. So first we need to create an SQL command. This is the SQL query and this is the connection. Then we can replace these parameters with the submitted data of the form. So we will replace the first name that we have here with the first name property that is associated to the first name of the form. Then we have last name, which is this parameter that is replaced with the last name property. Then we have email, then phone, then address, then company, and finally we have notes. Then using this statement, we will execute this SQL query. So after saving the customer in the database, we can redirect the user to the list of customers. So just after the catch block, we can redirect the user to the list of customers, which is the URL /customers/index. Also, if we have an exception, we need to display the error message in the page. So let's go to the page. And just after the title of the page, we can display the error message if we have an error message. So if model.errorMessage.length is greater than 0, this means that we have an error message. In this case, we can display a bootstrap alert of type danger, and here we will display the error message. Let's save the file. We can save also the other file. And here we can see that we have some errors. So even if we use the hot reload feature, sometimes we need to restart the application. Let's create a new customer. Let's fill the form. Then submit. So here we can see that we have this new customer and we are redirected to the list of customers. Now I will show you how to update the customer details. So when we click on Edit, we will go to the Edit page and we will provide it with a parameter called ID, which is the customer ID. So now let's create this page. So the Edit page will be very similar to the Create page. First, let's copy the properties of the Create model. So let's go to the Create model. Let's copy the different properties that we have here. And let's add them to the Edit model. So here we can delete the field and the constructor. And let's add the properties. Let's add the namespace. So in the Edit page, we need also to display the customer ID. So we can create a new property that we will bind to the form. We can copy this. Let's paste it here. So the property will be an integer and let's call it ID. And it will be bound to the form. So we don't need the required, we can delete it. Then let's create the Edit page. So we can copy the source code of the Create page. We can copy all of this div. So we can delete this code and let's paste the source code. Let's change the title of the page so we can write Edit Customer. Then in the form we need to create a new row. So we can copy this row. In the label, let's write ID. Let's bind the input field to the ID property. We don't need the span, so let's delete it, and the input field should be of type read only. Then let's change the bootstrap class that we have here, so let's add plain text. So here we will check if we have an error message or not, so we need also to create this property in the edit module. So we can create it here, for example. Then in the onGet method, we need to read the customer ID from the URL. So just here, let's add a parameter of type integer and let's call it ID, which is the name of the parameter that we have in the URL. Then let's connect to the database to read the details of the customer having this ID. So let's add the try-catch block. So if we have an exception, then we will display the error message to the user. And in the try block, we need to connect to the database. So let's add the connection string. Then let's create the SQL connection. Let's add the namespace. And let's open the connection. Then let's write the SQL query that allows us to read the customer details of the customer having this ID. So we will select all the columns from the customers table where the customer ID is equal to this parameter. Now we need to execute this query and we need to replace this parameter with the ID that we have just here. So we need to create an SQL command. So here we will replace the parameter ID that we have in the query by the variable ID that we have just here. Then let's create the SQL data reader that allows us to read the data of the query. So here we are reading the customer by ID. This means that we will have at most one customer. So now we need to check if we found a customer with this ID or not. So if reader.read is true, this means that we found a customer with this ID. In this case, we can read the customer details and we can save them in the different properties that are associated to the form. Otherwise, we did not find the customer. In this case, we can redirect the user to the list of customers. Now let's save all the files and let's restart the application. Then let's click on Edit. So this is the Edit page and here we have the customer details. But here for the ID we can see that we have these two buttons. So we can remove them by changing the type of this input field. So this is the input field of the ID. Just here we can add the type, which is equal to text. Let's save the file. And now we don't have the buttons anymore. So let's delete the first name, for example, and let's submit the form. So here we can see that we have this validation error. Let's click on cancel, and this is the list of customers. Now let's create the onPost method that allows us to update the customer details. So let's go to the edit module, and just here we can create the onPost method. So in the onPost method, we need the customer ID. We can read it from the URL as we did with the onGet method, but we can also read it from the ID property that we created just here. So we can read it either from the ID property that we have here, or from the URL as we did with the onGet method. So in this video, I will read the customer ID from the ID property. Then we need to check if the submitted data is valid or not. So we can add if not model state is valid. This means that the data is not valid. Then we can exit the onPost method and we can return the view. Otherwise, let's check if the optional properties are null or not. If the phone is null, we will initialize it with an empty string, and we will do the same thing with the address and with notes. Then let's update the customer details. So let's create the try-catch block. So in the catch block we have an error, we can display it to the user, and in the try block we need to connect to the database. So first let's create the connection string. Then let's create the SQL connection. Then let's write the SQL query that allows us to update the customer details. So we will update the customers table and we will update the first name, the last name, email, phone, address, company, and notes, where the customer ID is equal to this parameter. Then we need to replace the different parameters of this query by their values. So we need to create this SQL command and we need to replace the different parameters of this query by the values that are available in the different properties of this model. Then we need to execute the SQL command. And finally, after updating the customer details, we can redirect the user to the list of customers. So just here, after the catch block, we can redirect the user to the list of customers. Let's save the file. Let's update the details of this customer, for example. So let's update the email, the phone number, and the notes. Then submit. And here we can see that the email address and the phone number are updated correctly and we are redirected to the list of customers. Now I will show you how to delete customers. So when we click on the delete button, we will go to the delete page and we will provide it with a parameter called ID, which is the customer ID. So now we need to create the delete page. So in the delete page, we can display a confirmation message to the user. So let's delete this code. And let's add this div, so it will be displayed in the center of the page. We can add this rounded border and we can set the width of this div to 400 pixels, for example. Then we can add this h2 element with the title of the page, so we can write delete customer. Then we can add this horizontal separator. Then we can add these two paragraphs. So we can write, are you sure you want to delete this customer? Then here we can display the customer ID. So customer ID is equal to. Then let's add a C# variable that allows us to read the ID from the URL. So let's add then the name of the variable, which is request.query, and here we have the name of the parameter that we have in the URL, which is ID. Then to delete the customer, we can send a post request. So we can create an empty form that will be submitted using the post request. First, let's create an horizontal separator. Then let's create a form. So this is the form. It will be submitted using the post request. So in this form, we have this row with two columns. In the first column, we have the delete button, and in the second column, we have the cancel button. When we click on delete, we will submit the form. So here the type of this button is submit. And when we click on cancel, we will go to this URL and we will display the list of customers to the user. Then let's implement the onPost method in the delete model that allows us to delete the customer. So first let's delete the field and the constructor. Then let's create the onPost method. So in the onPost method, we need to read the customer ID from the URL. So let's add a parameter called ID. Then we can call the method delete customer that should allow us to delete the customer. So just here we can call delete customer. And let's provide this method with the customer ID. So after deleting the customer, we can redirect the user to the list of customers. So we can call a response.redirect, and this is the URL. Now we need to implement this method. So we can implement it just here. It can be a private method. So here we have the try catch block, then we have the connection string, then here we have the SQL connection. Then we will open the connection, and this is the SQL query that allows us to delete the customer from the customers table, where the customer ID is equal to this parameter. Then we need to create an SQL command that allows us to execute this query, and of course we need to replace this parameter by the ID that we have just here, and we need to execute the SQL query. And if we have any exception, then we can display the error message on the console. Let's save the different files. And here we can see that we have this error. So let's stop the application. and let's run it again. Let's delete the customer with the ID 17. So here we can see that we have, are you sure you want to delete this customer? And this is the customer ID. If we click on cancel, we are back on the list of customers. Now let's click on delete, and you can see that the customer with the ID 17 has been deleted. So if you want to delete the customer from this page without displaying this message, then we can update the source code. So we can copy these two statements. Let's add them to the onGet method. And here let's read the customer ID from the URL. Let's save the file and let's restart the application. Now let's delete the customer with this ID. So we can see that the customer has been deleted directly from this page. In the next video, I will show you how to implement the search functionality and the pagination functionality. You can find the video link in the description.